Well, I get asked a lot if it still makes sense to buy now that interest rates have more than doubled where they were from last year. So if you remember last year, you were probably going to have an interest rate of around 3%. Now you're having an interest rate around 7% today. So does it still make sense? I want to break down the numbers because I feel like that's a really valuable tool. But first, let's take a trip down memory lane. If you were writing an offer back in 2021, this could have been your experience. Maybe you were shotgunning offers. That means putting out offers on multiple different properties at the same time. Maybe you were, because there was just so little inventory, right? Offering above list price and maybe even above appraised value for the home. Maybe you're waiving contingencies. You're not doing an inspection. You're not worried about an appraisal. Maybe you have to close in 20 days just to be competitive and you barely get to even sleep on it before you have to make a decision. And then you're off and running. Maybe you're putting down hard earnest money and losing money just to win the offer. And maybe you even went so far as to write a love letter to the seller detailing why you and your family and your 2 dogs are so great for that neighborhood and better than anybody else could be. So that was kind of a rough time to be in the market. The money was cheap, interest rates were lower, but what did you have to do to get a home? Could you even get a home? So to get into the numbers side of it, the median list price at that time was about $463,000. That being said, folks were getting about 103% of list price, so they were collecting more like $475,000. And I like to round up, so bear with me. Interest rates about 3%. And that gives you a monthly payment of about $2,000 per month. Not bad. Now, 2022, things have changed. We look a lot more like a buyer's market today than last year, which was a clear seller's market. So, median ask price is somewhere around $515,000. Median purchase price, however, is actually at 96% of median asking price. So we're more like $495,000 for the purchase price. So folks are getting a little better deal than the asking price instead of offering more than the asking price last year. Interest rates, we know, are around 7%, which gives you about a payment of $3,000 a month, right? Now, the topic of should you buy now is certainly more complex, and we're going to get into some of the pros and cons of the market. But based on the numbers, this is a tough pill to swallow, right? To pay $1,000 more for practically the same house than you would have last year. So let's get into some of those other reasons why, though, it might make sense to buy even in today's market. Let's talk about a few of the differences between these two markets. So in 2021, if you were paying more than the asking price, you were going in with no equity, right? Maybe even if you were paying above the appraised value, you especially had no equity. People were so desperate in 2021, they were waiving contingencies. So if that house had a leaky sink, they were just taking it rather than worrying about risking having the seller give the house to somebody else. There was so little inventory that you were just lucky to find a house if you could find one, pick one up. And maybe it wasn't the perfect house, but you settled. There was lots of competition. 20 offers on some homes, right? And having to write love letters just to try and give yourself that little extra emotional edge. And the last thing is you had no choice. Your hands are tied. You need a house, so you'll pay whatever they're asking for, whether even if it's above appraised value, just to win the deal and get the house. Let's contrast last year by this year. So in 2022, the experience from a buyer would be that you would have double the inventory than you did last year. So that's a way better opportunity for you to find a house that you love and not just one that checks the box. Nobody wants to settle for a house. And in this market, you run a much higher chance of finding a house that you really, really love and having a whole lot less competition on it. So you've got way more control in this market than you did the last market of last year, because we're shifting towards a buyer's market where sellers are a little anxious and they're willing to play ball. Seller concessions are probably the biggest part of that. That last year it would have been tough to ask a seller to reduce the purchase price or make some repairs, even if they were reasonable, because a seller just had options to get a buyer who was willing to take the house, probably sight unseen, because they were all so desperate. Equity, because you're not paying above the appraised value for this house and therefore coming out of pocket with that additional amount, you're keeping money in your pocket. And so this house effectively costs less because of that. So you walk into equity because you're not paying more than the appraised value, and you keep more money in your pocket because you're not paying more than the appraised value. So that's the situation for 22. Now, I want to kind of tie this up with a few more thoughts about really why this might be a good market to buy in, even though you're paying more every month. Let's wrap this up. Is it worth buying at 7%? You're probably thinking maybe not. You know, as we look at those examples, a year ago you were paying $2,000 a month-ish. Now you're paying $3,000 a month-ish. Is it really a good idea? I think you've got to really decide if you'd rather be in the market of today or rather be shopping in the market of last year. A couple other questions to think about that I want to leave with you. So if rates go down, what will happen to inventory? Well, last year rates were down, so there was no inventory. And I wonder if we would have another run on inventory if rates suddenly dropped. So keep that in mind. If you're thinking you might wait, for rates to come down. Can you get a better rate now? A big incentive that sellers are doing right now that we didn't have in the market of last year is a seller concession to buy down your interest rate. Now, I will go into detail on the rate buy down programs in my next videos coming up, but suffice it to say that a seller will basically pay so that you can have a lower interest rate. And then the last thing is getting a better deal now. So we mentioned in the first example that maybe homes on average are selling for 96% of the asking price. That is probably true across the board, but that also means that there are homes that are selling for a lot less than asking price because there are sellers who are in a hurry. And I've had a lot of success finding homes that have been on the market for longer than 30 days and have had way more than just a 3% price reduction, right? They've dropped $50,000, $100,000 off their purchase price as they sit on the market for longer and longer and longer. So if you think you might be able to pick up a deal like that, there's a much better opportunity to do that in this market than there was last year. Anyway, if you've got further questions about this, I'd be happy to talk more about it. Feel free to reach out. Hope to talk to you soon.